one of the biggest challenges we have as marketers is, how do we stand out in the crowd? How do we make this happen? How do we let people know that we're there, and how do we let people know that we're unique? So one of the ways to do that, and probably the best way, is to use storytelling. So let me tell you just a moment about me. Most of you know me because you've been following me a while, and you're on this call because you're on my list. So I am a published author. I just released a book on Kindle, which you see, but it's not my first book. I've had a few on Amazon and some that I sell through my website. So I have quite a bit of experience writing, and that's how I got into storytelling, because writing, I'm using stories a great deal when I write books on self-help, when I write any kind of a book, when I write articles. And when I was an academic, that's where the PhD comes from. I was in academia for about 20 years. And back then, I studied metaphor and storytelling, not as much as we're doing it now, but I am familiar with this. So I'm finding that it's a language to use as a copywriting tool. In fact, I would say I view storytelling differently from a lot of people. I see storytelling as a marketing tool and a copywriting tool. I don't see it as something you tell around the campfire. I mean, you could tell a fairy tale to your children, you could do all these things. But if you're putting on your business hat or marketing hat, you have to think of storytelling in a different way. You have to think of storytelling as a tool that you will use to connect with your audience. So I've helped probably hundreds, I haven't counted, gain a compelling presence, grow their business with purpose, in other words, with intention. And also, many of my clients do tend to be purposeful. Even when they're lawyers and accountants, and I've had doctors, I've had medical people, they have a purpose. They're really strong advocates for their clients. And I'm a total fanatic about simplifying your marketing. I see a lot of gurus out there who want to make things complicated. You know, they want this to be rocket science, and it's not. That's one of my goals. And you can see there my book, which you can get in Kindle form. It will be out in CreateSpace and print later in the month. But for now, rather later in January, we're still in December, and now you can get the Kindle version. I'm hearing Kindle seems to be more popular these days, and people seem to like the book. I'm hearing good things. So let's look at for a minute at what is special about stories. Why do they work so well to help you stand out and develop a brand that will be a real strong go-to brand? So the main reason is for using storytelling to stand out and to develop a strong brand is that stories allow you to be hype-free when you're promoting yourself. So instead of saying, I can leap tall buildings with a single bound, you can tell a story about how you leaped over this particular building with one bound. You can make it a very matter-of-fact, straightforward story. So you're not bragging. You're not promoting yourself to people as someone who is full of hype and exaggeration. You're really just telling a straightforward set of facts, and you turn it into a story. Also, stories will allow you to be unique. This is one of my favorite parts of storytelling. Stories allow you to be unique by definition, because when you tell a story, you're the only person who can tell that story. Nobody else can tell your story or can tell a story that you have created. Now, I'm going to say in a few minutes that I do not believe there is such a thing as your story. You have many stories, and you choose the story that most strategically works for you. But you don't have a story that other people have, the way you tell it, the way you set it up. Even when it's not about you, it's your uniquely told story. So that sets you apart as being unique. And when you brand yourself, when you want to stand out, that's what you want to do. The way you work with clients is unique. The kind of success stories you have is unique. And that's what will come out when you tell stories. And finally, stories are memorable. You know, if you think about it, if you're getting together with someone over coffee or a drink and you're talking, you rarely say, wow, let's talk about what a great, cool website you have. You talk about a story. You share gossip. You say, did you hear that this person had this problem and that's what they did? Or did you hear that this person helped a client or helped this way and maybe that's someone I should work with? It's really something that people will tell. If you think about it when you go to the movies, and we all do this, you come back from the movie and someone said, what was the movie about? And you tell what the story was about. You tell the storyline. Storylines are easy to remember. And for that reason, stories will make you more memorable when you tell them. Same principle as gossip. So the reasons you're not standing out with a story are these. There are many reasons, but these are the three that I want to focus on today. First, a lot of people say, I don't have a story. I feel that I don't have a story to tell, or it's a boring story. And I'm not a hero. I haven't been on a journey. And then the second reason is they don't know why they should be telling a story. Or I have heard so many people sign up for things that I offer and they say, I keep hearing I need to tell a story, but how do I do it? What's the purpose? And that keeps people from telling stories that they might tell otherwise. And they might be perfectly good stories, but the challenge is to match the story to your purpose and start with the purpose and work back into a story. You may find that you don't even need a story if you do that. And finally, the third thing will be no connection. And that's probably the most important point that I want to make about standing out with the story. It's the way you connect to your audience. Because sometimes the audience doesn't really care about your personal life, and they want to connect with a different kind of story, not a hero's journey, not a hard luck story, not a bare your soul story. And then I want to talk about the difference between relatable and personal. That is probably a key distinction that I don't see very often. And then prospects versus clients. You tell them different kinds of stories because they have different kinds of interests. So let's look at each of these in turn. First, you may say, I have no story. Well, you have a story. Everybody has stories, but it may not be your story. You may not have a hero's journey. And that's fine. You don't need a hero's journey. In fact, a lot of times a hero's journey will get in the way and people don't care. I met an emergency room doctor, when I was out walking my dog, and we were talking, and I said, gee, how did you become an ER doctor? That sounds so exciting and so dramatic, and maybe you like the adrenaline rush. And he said, no, I'm just good with my hands, and I like sewing things up. That's what I do a lot of in the emergency room. I sew people up. Well, that's not a very dramatic or exciting story, but it's a true one. So if he's going to tell a story, that's probably not going to be his story. And if he needs a story, which he may not, he would find something different, maybe an example of a day in the emergency room. You don't need drama. In fact, most people don't have drama. You may find drama in something you could use that's not about you. And there are many ways to do that. Maybe it's about your clients. Maybe it's a metaphor you're using that has drama. So if you say you don't have a story, it just means it's not your story. You can stand out with other kinds of stories. And in my book and elsewhere, I talk about the different kinds of stories. The success story is probably, if you need to find one story for your story toolkit, don't choose your hero story. Choose your success story. How did you help your clients? What I tell everyone is try to get a minimum of 3 success stories. How you help clients achieve success. Put those in your toolkit and use them over and over again or in different places. You can start with a testimonial and turn that into a success story. You can also use a concept story. A concept story is a story that explains the way you do something. It says, here's a way to look at what I do. And it really draws on a metaphor of something that you have. So it might be something like, if you have to keep the wolf from your door, then you want to do this and this. And yeah, that's a cliche, and you can do it. But that would be an example of someone to illustrate how they help people. It could be something along those lines. And I have many examples in the book and elsewhere. But anytime you have to tell a story of someone, let's say you're a new coach or you're in a field that people haven't heard of very much, telling an example, a story that lets people draw an analogy will be a huge help to your clients and to explaining what you do. And then let's look at the second reason people don't have stories to stand out, which is there's a sense of no purpose. Start out with what makes you different. How does your story share this difference? If it doesn't share why you're different, then maybe you don't need the story, at least not now. Maybe you can tell another kind of story or no story. I want to emphasize that. You don't have to have a story. Some people do just fine and they never tell a story. So that's something you can consider when you're planning your communications, your marketing communications. The key is to align your story with your brand. And I've seen many people do that extremely well. For instance, there's one coach, actually I mentioned, Connie Reagan-Green. Some of you know her. She's a great example of branding by stories. In fact, everything she does is a story. And her brand seems to be, I can do it. If I can do it, anybody can do it. if she'll tell stories like, I had a lot of trouble doing this and this and this, and now I can do it. And she'll tell stories about people she helped. She had a story once about some people who came because they were dead broke, and they wanted to make money, and they didn't think they had skills. They were retired. They were living on nothing. And she said, I can show you in a very simple way. You can do what I do, and I'll show you how you can make it happen. And that's how her stories align with her brand. And I think if you asked her, I don't think she would say, this is my brand. But I wrote about her in my book, and I think I hit it, that this is really a large part of what her message is. And another coach says she started out a while back, and her whole thing was, when she started, she had children, and she did not want to work full time. She did not want to work 40 hours a week. She wanted to limit her time because she wanted time for her children. And that's how she built up her whole business, is building in time for the family. And today she continues the brand with the story that, look, I made it. I'm doing very well now. I'm making 7 figures. No drama, no fuss. I've done it on my own terms. And you can do it too. So she's built her brand into her storytelling. Oops. Screen. What's going on? Next. Okay, I'm going to take just a moment before I go into the third point about connection, which is just to give you an idea of one of the ways I work with clients, because I'm finding a lot of people don't know that I do this. I have a consultation. I just call it a power hour. It's very straightforward, but it's 90 minutes, one-to-one. We do a lot of work ahead of time. You send me what you need. And if you want to learn more about how you can stand out, build a brand, and use story in your marketing, review what you've written, anything like that, this is a really good way to do it. It's 90 minutes. And as I said, we don't just call. I do things ahead of time. I get your information, so we hit the ground running. And then we have a 1-week follow-up where you can do email consulting. And most coaches don't do that, and most consultants don't. It's just the call is over and you're done. But you could follow up and ask questions. And here's an example. This particular person, I have some on my page that you can see here, but Rachel said when she called, she wanted to pivot her business, and she could only stay for 60 minutes. She had somehow written down 60 instead of 90, so we covered all this in just 60 minutes. After 60 minutes, I was clear on benefits I bring to my clients and retooled my services with new price points. We revised the wording and structure of my home page, totally redirected my about page, and a lot more. And then she says, and I was thrilled to hear this, it was not just theory. We actually started defining the copy, drafting the copy and headlines. And our session was fun, and I enjoyed working shoulder to shoulder with Cathy. So that's the kind of thing you would expect on this consultation. This time through January 1, I'm throwing in a bonus. I have my courses, Brand Your Business One Story at a Time. And I'll also give you a second course, which could be my Become a Copywriter course or my Create Your Course, your own course. I have a 5-step blueprint. And those courses normally sell for $97. So I'll be giving those as bonuses just through December 1. If you sign up before then, and you can use the call anytime in January, because I don't like to delay it. When you could ask me more later or just send me an email. And I want to get on to the most important part of the branding to stand out, which is the connection. And it's very important to realize that you connect with particular audiences. So I want to make this distinction. I've never seen people discuss this, but I think it is absolutely positively critical to the whole topic of storytelling, which is that a lot of people think that stories have to be personal. And if you work with a marketing coach or a consultant, they'll probably tell you to get personal. People want to know the real you. Have you heard that? If you have, you type it into the chat. I've heard this. People are telling me get personal. But I want to tell you that getting personal is only part of the story. And what's really important is people don't want to know you personally. They want to relate to you. They want to know, hey, you're like me. You've been through what I have. You work with people like me. I mean, there's no better way than to look at the last election when, regardless of your politics, both of the candidates were very open about the things they liked, but they were very different in the way they use their personal life. And for some people, when Trump talks about going to McDonald's, they say, yeah, he's like me. He's a good guy. He goes to McDonald's. And to other people, that was horrifying. And when Hillary Clinton talks about relaxing with a glass of wine and some yoga, to some people, it's like, yes, that's like me. I do that too. But to other people, it's like, who does she think she is? So being personal isn't really what's going to get you results. It's being relatable. And that means knowing your audience and sharing what they can relate to when you talk about yourself. So if you're, for example, working with a lot of people if your target market is divorced people and you're a coach, a relationship coach, and you're working with people who are just divorced, then you might talk about your own experience with divorce and relationships. But if you don't have that experience, then you would talk about something else and just show that you could relate. You would talk about the clients you've worked with. You don't have to talk about your own personal stuff. And in fact, sometimes you're better off not doing that. And secondly, when people don't know you, they don't need to know as much personal information about you. For instance, I like to talk about my cats and my dog. And if you go on Facebook, you will see that I'm talking about my cats and my dog. And if you know me, then you probably want to know more. After people work with you a while, they want to know a little more about you sometimes. So we'll look at that in just a second. But most of the time, when they're considering you, they want to know about your expertise. I mean, I could care less if my accountant always wanted to work with numbers since he was 5. I want to know, is he going to keep me away from being audited? I want to know if he's going to make sure I get the maximum savings on my taxes. And that's all I care about. I don't really care about his personal life, if he's married or single. Occasionally it comes up. I mean, when I was doing my will and estate planning, whatever I was doing, and I said, I'm leaving my money to my animals and I'm making provision for my animals and animal welfare. And the lawyer said, I have a beagle. And I said, oh, okay. So, I mean, and realized she understood the situation, but that was not a big deal for me. I was more concerned that she worked exclusively in this field and she could handle situations and she knew what the pitfalls were in drafting up a will and all the other documents. Again, they may not care. And that's really important when you're telling the story. And people say, tell a story about yourself. Your potential clients and even your current clients just may not care. Sometimes they really want to know about you. But what I'm finding is that if you get too personal too soon, you actually have the potential to drive people away. And you can there's such a thing as too much information. And we tend to avoid that a lot nowadays. I mean, you go on Facebook and people are sharing things that are really unusual. So do they care? You don't have to tell a story. And if you do tell a story, then you want to tell a story that is directly relevant and about something they care about. So if you've got a question, I've allowed time. And I had some before. So if you have time, if you'd like to type a question into the chat box, I think that's the best way to do this. Then I'd like to hear your questions. One question was, if you don't have a story, do you have to come up with a story? What if you just don't want a story? And it's a question I've heard often. And the answer to that is, of course, you don't need a story. You absolutely don't have to have a story every single communication. In fact, some of the times you will find it's best just to give the facts. And one of the things I talked about in my book, for example, is some of the places you don't tell a story. For example, let's say you're selling and you're doing a sales call. You're actually talking to someone and promoting in a sales situation. And someone has an objection and they say, okay, but how many times does it work for this or that? And you come back and say, well, let me tell you a story about that. You're going to be seen as evasive. You could be seen as trying to hide something. So if someone asks you a direct question or asks about something that has to do with numbers, then it may not be the best time to tell a story. The time to tell a story will be when you want to really promote yourself more broadly and let people see you as someone different in the marketplace. For instance, you may want to be known as the lawyer who is particularly caring. and really advocates for his or her clients. And I can give you two lawyer examples. One was, I wrote a website for, actually for both of them, but one was for an immigration lawyer. He had a story that was truly amazing and really showed how he was different. A woman called and said, my son has disappeared. He was picked up by immigration. I don't know where he is. I want to find him because I think he's here illegally, and I think it was a mistake. So the lawyer got on the phone, tracked the guy down, and they were in California, and the missing person turned out to be in Arizona. So the lawyer got in his car, drove to Arizona, tracked the person down, found that he was being held in the wrong kind of prison, had to get special permission to meet with his client, did all these things, and then eventually found, as the mom had predicted, that the person was picked up in error and therefore was not supposed to even be there. Another time I had a website with a lawyer who is a really, I didn't know lawyers did this, but she does a billing and debt collection. And she exclusively does that and landlord-tenant. And she tells a story about why she does this, which is when she was growing up, her family did not have a lot of money, but they did have rental property. And they relied on that income to survive. So when she's collecting money, she's not the mean old bill collector. She's helping people who need the money get the money they deserve. So that's those are some examples. So here's a question from Nan. I have often heard about telling stories that show you get their struggle, that you have a solution that's worked for you, a victim to victory kind of story. And this is a good question. What do we do if we don't feel we've suffered from that kind of pain? Well, it's a great question. And this is one of the reasons I've gotten into storytelling. If you go to a cardiologist, chances are your cardiologist never had a heart attack. But what you want to do is tell stories about how you worked with clients. So instead of a victim to victory, you have a success story about a client that you helped. So and I would generally, you have to be a little bit careful about how you paint your clients when you tell a success story, because you have to make them sound strong and confident. Nobody wants to identify with the loser, and your potential clients will be identifying with your current clients. So I would not say call them victim to victory. It's more like someone who is a really sharp person who got into a situation that any normal smart person would get into. And they tried certain things, and you explain it's understandable. Of course they had trouble doing this on their own. Most people would have trouble doing this on their own. But you, the coach, the consultant, the lawyer, the accountant, this is what you do all day long. You have expertise and you help them. And you describe your client in such a way that anyone reading your story knows that you're not judgmental, that you like your clients. And yeah, and this could happen to anyone. And you work with that client and you solved it. I mean, the example I just gave you with the immigration lawyer. Now, his father was an immigrant, but he was born in the U.S. and was a citizen, so he never had the experience of being treated like an immigrant. So he tells the stories about how he advocated for his clients who were having difficulties with the immigration system, and that works for him. So does that answer the question? I hope. And we're coming to the end of the 30 minutes. I'm finding that 30 minutes is pretty, yes, she said, thank you, great. 30 minutes seems to be what people want these days. We're all busy, and 30 minutes is a good coffee break. You can get a quick fix. I'd really like to hear from you about comments, topics you'd like to see in the future, anything else you'd like to have covered, because I plan to do more of these in 2018. And I got away, I haven't done very many in 2017, and I'm getting started and trying different platforms. So I'd really like to hear from you. So if anyone else have a question? It doesn't look like it. So I want to thank you very much for joining me today. Please send me a note. Let me know what you think. And I hope to see you again on future training sessions in January. And again, if you'd like to work with me one-to-one, I have my power hour. If that doesn't work for you, send me a note and we'll talk about how I can help you tell the story you need to grow your own business. Thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of the afternoon.